European Economic Association is one of the top journals in economics, and it's a rising star at this moment. Very young, just graduated from East University about 7 years ago, but now he has become a top scholar in surveying and experiment. So I use this slides for our course, but we do not use all the slides, something like that as well to our course. And as you know, some of you will go to this program, so at least at the moment you also have some feeling that you are already in the BC program because you study at the level of BC. Wow. To some extent, and all the paper you read so far, and you study so far actually cutting edge literature at the moment. So then we are having fun here about literatures and in the field. Yeah. So yeah, the motivation here we know we already studied. Expectation plays a central role in economics, and because of that we want to know how households and firms they form expectation and how expectations closely affect households and firms' behavior. And we also look at the role of central bank as government over households and firms, but the basic idea still based on the assumption that households and firms they behave according to their expectation about economic conditions. So in order to do these things, we need to know how to measure expectations and the intention to economic variable, right? That is the first step. And then the second step, we need to understand or explore the causal effect of expectation on the outcome variable like consumption, saving, or for household and for firms, we need to know the causal effect of expectation to the firm's business decisions, like whether they can expand their investment or production or not. So in order to do that, we need to design a survey experiment to exogenously grab expectation and attention so that we can provide a causal evidence. So the first step here, we need to know how to measure needs and expectations. We already studied over last 2 days, and today we focus on how to design information intervention and what is the potential effect of potential size effect of survey experiment related to the anchoring and demand effect from the experimental. And this slide also based on the paper about designing information provision experiments in the Journal of Economic Literature, so the top journal in economics as well. And it's the most recent papers it's accused about how to design the survey experiment. And why we focus on information provision experiment because we conduct an online survey, so that's why it's very easy to conduct to provide information to the participants compared with other fields of experiment like in laboratory or in a field experiment, because in the field experiment we can conduct different things and we can commonly provide different incentives to those who participate in the experiment. For example, in microeconomics or in the economics of allocation, for example, they can provide different teaching programs to different children or households, and then they can have also effect of different program training on the outcome variable like the income or health condition, for example. But here we just focus on the information provision experiment because we focus on monetary and macroeconomics and the role of central bank communication in anchoring household inflation expectation. And we want to know more about the monetary macroeconomics in terms of possible form expectation. So that's why the information is the people they have the full set of the information, and after they collect and they can process all the information they can for fully rational expectation. So that's why if we provide powerful information, we can change people belief about the future. And then the point here we want to see whether the change in belief or expectation is really change people economic action, like consumption, saving for households and for firms, it's an investment, for example. So that's why we focus on designing information discovery. And yeah. So in this slide, there are two sets of techniques. One is how to measure the expectation, or how to measure limits. We already covered yesterday. So this part just for joint information. They look at a different aspect. They look at how people form stock market expectation question and measurement. So we can use it as a reference so to see another example of how to measure expectation about stock market, such as about development, for example. And then we focus on the second part of this slide about the information chickens, where we look at the role of attention to this first information and how to mitigate the anchoring and demand effects. And then we have some practical advice and cognitive experiment with some theory. And I also upload this morning in our lecture note in the board about folders about an example how to conduct a survey experiment from my research, and where I also upload the slide with photography as well as the full folder for the paper publication and the replication file as well. And I also upload the LaTeX file so that you also know how to use LaTeX to wire paper, and also the LaTeX file for the slide, so that you also know how to use LaTeX to create a presentation as well. So it's an example for you to follow and to practice. And after this one, I will go back to the example so that we know how to do that. Yeah. So the first set was how to measure belief. There's also, in this slide, I also mentioned 4 types of elicitation techniques. One is the qualitative question we already looked at yesterday, and quantitative right belief, and qualitative belief. We already covered 3 things here, and here also one more thing that I think also very interesting, and I quickly mentioned it about quantitative open-ended questions. So it means that we have not only close end question like what do you think about inflation is determined with increase a lot or decrease a lot, or people have to put numbers like quantitative expectation, but now we have an open-end question so that people will answer by filling some sentences. And based on these sentences, we can also understand how people form expectation, whether what they mentioned in the answer. For example, in my data that in the document, I already have some data for that. I have an open-ended question to ask people how, what do you think about the reason for the reason for the recent high inflation periods, and people will just fill some sentences on what they think about the reason for that, and then we check whether their answer is correctly or not. What is the reason for that? Whether they mention that because of the war in Ukraine, or because of the increasing price of the oil price or gasoline price, for example, or they mention something about because of the central bank they tighten up the policy for them. So if the central bank tighten up the policy is not is the reason for the high inflation, but actually try to keep the inflation going down. So we can check based on the qualitative answers by that way that people fill in the surveys. We also can elicit their expectation and their belief. And this is a new technique, and it's quite challenging to analyze this data. And most of the time, the gold standard at the moment is still we have to read it by ourselves, or we can hire some research assistant to read the answers. And then we also have to check whether the research assistant read it correctly and interpret it correctly as well. And then we also can use some AI technique as well. For example, we have ChatGPT classifies the qualitative answers into different groups, like the emotional aspect, or where they're optimistic or pessimistic, or where what is the reason behind the answer. So yeah, I think it's a very nice, and it's at the moment I think it's a new technique to measure how people believe about object and the techniques now that we can combine both the question here. For example, we look at both open-end question and also with closed-end question, like qualitative and quantitative expectation to see the correlation and to see whether it's consistent with each other. And the objective and so the open-end question here is also there are a lot of advantages, like anyone can answer that, right? So they can answer that. It's not only about the direction of the effect or the quantitative number, but they also can talk about the reason behind the thinking. So that is important that we can understand the mechanisms and deepen how they form expectation. So yeah, but on the disadvantage of this question is that it requires a lot of effort to time and to write out the answers, because normally it takes quite a long time for people to answer it. So in the surveys, that it takes normally about 10 to 15 minutes. Open-ended question already account for 1 or 2 minutes already. So it takes a lot of time. So we cannot ask a lot of open-ended questions in the survey. Just 1 or 2 or maximum 3 open-ended questions on survey. So we have to think very carefully which is open-ended question we should use. Maybe we have 30 questions overall, but only 1 or 2 or maximum 3 open-ended questions in the survey, because it requires a lot of effort from people to hide the answers. And yeah, the challenge is how to analyze the open-ended question as well. It also takes some time to do it. It's not easy to conduct this by Stata, and but we have to read and then classify the open-ended question to understand the reason behind. But it's very important topic. So here is some that we already discussed most of these things already. Put some more example for you to reference. And now we go to the key part of today is how to design a survey experiment with the information generated. Yeah, the information treatment, here we look at 4 topics: the attention versus information, how to mitigate the anchoring and demand effect. Because when we provide the information, the respondent, the users, based on the information we provide, some number we provide, and then they will anchor to that number, or they just want to fulfill or to comfort experimenter. So that could be many effects and how to mitigate these effects and how we can make the experiment with complicated. That is in macroeconomics is going to be quite important. That is how we can connect the theoretical and the experimental with the theoretical model. So let's go with the information treatment. Yeah, because before the survey experiment here, we just have some survey data like the neutral quest survey data or median survey expectation, consumer expectation. We have question on inflation expectation. We have question on consumption, for example, and then we just read consumption on inflation expectation, right? And then we know the effect of inflation expectation on level of spending, on the magnitude of spending growth, for example, so that we still can understand about whether the people they make the consumption decision in line with Euler equation or with the IS curve in the distributed model, right? But it's just a correlation. It's not about the cause effect. It's because we just observe available data set and we do not have any instrument to vary the level of inflation expectation. So normally it's just about the correlation more or less when we just request the level of consumption on inflation expectation. Of course, with the techniques of microeconometrics, we also can use some instrument variables to have result is more causal effect. It looks like causal effect, like with instrument variable. Like for example, we can use some perception of inflation as an instrument for the inflation expectation, for example. But it's not a strong instrument because a lot of argument whether it's a good instrument or not, right? So a lot of discussion about whether the information, the instrument variable is valid or not, and normally it's had to be a perfect instrument variable with a lot of concerns. So here we can use survey experiments that we can provide some information related to inflation expectation, and then because the information we provide is randomly, so it's an absolutely valid instrument variable that can vary the level of inflation expectation, so that we can study the counter effect of inflation expectation on the unknown variables of interest like consumption, saving, or also with household investment. Yeah. So all the results before the experiment here we have there's a correlation more or less because of three main reasons here. First, causality or objective variables or dimension error, and we know that's a technique to solve both three problems. To solve both the three problems with the instrument variable, right? The instrument variable can fit all these problem of bias estimation, and so the experiment is one way to solve the problem. Yes, so now in order to get the causal estimates, beliefs on behavior, researcher provide respondent with some information. So here is the outline of the experiment. First, we measure the prior belief about the variable of interest, like likelihood of recession. But in terms of inflation expectation, we can measure what do you think about inflation in the next term. So that's a very simple question, but we still can measure the prior belief about inflation before we provide any information. And then we'll be asking inflation expectation again, but using a different question. Yeah. So first we measure the prior belief about the variable of interest, and then we randomly provide the information to some subset of the sample. Yeah. For example, we can provide some forecast potential inflation rate, for example, the current inflation rate or the inflation rate over the past 5 years or past 10 years, it depends on which type of information we want to provide, right? So whether it's a last year inflation or last 10 years or last 20 years, it depends on the model we want to base on to see whether people they rely more on the current inflation rate or the people where they form specification they based on the 20 years historical data. And one control group without any information or with some information that is unrelated to inflation. So that we call that is the negative control group. And after we randomly provide different information about related to the bribery, we measure the behavior of interest, like consumption, how much you spend in the future, or what is the attitude regarding the future spending on different items like people spending or saving, or we also can measure it after 3 months. After 3 months, we can measure how much you spend over the past 3 months, for example, so that we can see the impact of inflation expectation here on the outcome variable that we measure after the treatment. Yeah, we also measure post-treatment belief from the prior belief here, but in this case we need to design another question, still very similar to the prior belief, but with a different format. Like for example, we can ask for a forecast of inflation expectation at the prior belief, and after the treatment here we ask a density forecast question, for example. So that is two different questions, right? But it's still the same thing about inflation expectation. But because the participants when they cannot distinguish that whether we already changed the format of the question just before and after the treatment. So and the point is that we need to make sure that the questions we ask before and after the treatment is in different format, so that the people they find out it's not asking the same question twice, because people they hit to answer one question twice. Yeah.
Sorry, Professor. My question may be a bit naive, but then in the previous slide, when you talk about the information treatment, there's a part whereby you say attention versus information. What's the difference?
For the first year,
Yes.
for the attention versus the information. Yes. So, for example, here, yeah, I will explain a little bit later about that. But the attention here it means that when we provide some information, for example, the gas price, when we provide what is the current gas price, for example. So it's, maybe the people they now just think about some gas that is the attention to the news about the gas, but it's not about content of the information we provide about what about the price change in gas price, but it's because now we think more about the gas price, so it's not about content of the information.
Can I link that to the process that you mentioned just now on the step where we actually provide the information to the treatment group? How are we ensure that, just like your gasoline example, how we ensure that is whatever we provide to them and their response is genuinely is they update their belief rather than they just pay attention to whatever we tell them to?
Yeah, that's we need to think. It's depends on case by case for different projects. So it's and then we have to discuss whether our information here is related to or have any information in our treatments here is related to attention, or how we have to deal with attention. Yeah, so it's case by case. It's not have, but that's the topic we need to be considered to make sure that the information we provide is very much about the information we want to provide. Yeah, we also can use that as well. Yeah.
Okay, in this one, like we only do the after, or we could also
Yeah,
test the before.
we only need to measure it after the treatment for the level of interest. Yeah. But we also can measure it before treatment as well to see how people will update their consumption behavior before and after. But I think it's too much, so that's why we will look the researcher they will provide the consumption or the outcome of changes after the treatment.
Okay, so can I summarize the thing like we're trying to see whether A cause B, so A is the belief, B is the behavior,
Yeah.
and we want to affect A by informing people
Yeah.
certain information,
Yeah.
and then to test whether like having that or not having that can impact on the outcome
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Like, are there any research about like the vice versa? Like, we try to affect on the behavior and then check whether they can have the causal effect on the beliefs. Like, not information provision, but like, for example, like teach people or show people how to actually do the behavior like what we want, for example.
Yeah, it could be as well. So in that case, we provide some kind of narrative. So we can explain some mechanism, for example, and then we can see how people whether they understand our narrative or how they interpret the narrative we provide. Yeah, that's also possible as well. Yeah.
I just want to ask more about how we separate the group to treatment group and control group, because I imagine that if we do on the lab in the lab,
Yeah.
so we can separate. But this is the human social.
Yeah.
So I don't know if having any
Yeah, some,
can say
Yeah.
peer effect or something
Yeah.
between the group, so how we can control.
yeah, for example, you want to know how to run the mind, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. One easy example. So, for example, we have an ID, right? Because everyone have an ID. So ID here it can create by the survey platform. So the ID here is like the example we see. And maybe this one end by 1, 2, 3, 4, and we have two groups over here, for example. So also odd numbers here in one group, and also even numbers here in another different group, for example. So it randomly.
So how we provide the information to the treatment group? I just want to ask how we provide the information for treatment group, that we make sure that control group don't have that information.
Yeah, that's quite simple, right? So here is a group of 4,000 households, okay? 4,000 households. And now we divide the 4,000 group here in 4 groups. And each group will have 1,000 observations. So all group here is similar in terms of its income, education, and so on. So everything is the same. And also 4 group here. And one group here is a control group. Who is a control group? Gives out any information. And here's group 1 with info 1, and group 2 with info 2. And here's group info 3. So children number 1, children number 2, and children number 3. Right? Okay. And then we add the poster delete. So, and then we can study the effect of the information we provide here on poster delete compared to treatment 1 compared to the control come back with control group, or even inform group, number two come back with the inform group number one. Right?
Just want to make sure that guess is correct. My guess is correct. So all the information will provide during the surveys process, during the interview, join the survey, the online survey, right?
Yeah.
Not day by day. Not. I mean I imagine that we ask them today and then for a week we fill them with information and then after 1 week so we make the survey again. It's not correct, right?
It's also possible, yeah. But normally the standard one here the whole survey is here conducted in about 15 minutes.
Okay. Now I guess it. Okay.
But we also can separate the first one, just this one, and next week you measure the primary week, and the week after you can also measure some outcome rate or how much you spend over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Average.
Okay. I just wonder because if having so many gap time between, so the control we cannot make sure that control group don't have the information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
That's
that's
why I
we
concerned.
conduct
Okay.
everything just-
If
just-
during the
everything just about in 15
Okay.
minutes. And the information of the week here just maximum about 1 minute.
Okay.
And then after that we measure the primary week, and before we provide the information here, we ask everyone about the prior period.
Yeah.
Okay? Like what we expect about inflation in the last German, in the next German, and then we ask a bit inflation expectation in the next German. The term here is the point forecast, okay? And here you ask inflation expectation again. So this next command. But here we use the NCD forecast. Or probabilistic question, so we use another question to measure inflation expectation, but it's in different format with the point forecast. Okay?
Yeah, I get it.
So that is still the same thing, and the respondents they will know that some people they do not use any function, but only some totally significant function.
Yeah. Sorry, I did not do that kind of survey before, so I cannot imagine that it happened during the survey time.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So the whole survey is here in about 15 minutes. So now we can have the information treatments here to vary the level of inflation expectation. Right? And then we can, the next steps we measure some outcome of interest, like consumption, saving, or investment. Okay? Yeah. Like consumption. Yeah. We can ask directly after the post survey, for example, some question about the attitude to spending. Would you think now is good time to spend on fuel things? Or now it's good time to buy a house, now it's good time to buy a car. Not attitude question. But we can ask right after the post survey. Okay, so that we still can study the positive effects of inflation expectation on attitude of spending, like consumption, saving, investment. Yeah. So attitude. But we can ask directly, immediately after the post survey, but we also can measure the actual spending. So for example, after 3 months, we survey again, so the follow-up survey. Follow-up survey. So the follow-up survey will be conducted after 3 months, and we ask all the customers how much you spend on different items, right? So that we have the actual spending. Okay? So we have actual spending here so that we can study the positive effect of inflation expectation on actual spending, not only about the attitude, but now it's about actual spending. Okay? So it's the positive effect of inflation expectation on actual spending, not only about the attitude. Yeah.
Why in the cloud there is asking we use theoretical cats and then after that we use density for cats? So cats mean like they just give us a number, right? And density for
Yeah, density forecast it means that we have 10 different beats.
ah.
Yeah, so the probability question, like in the yesterday we looked at the New Job Ad survey, and they have 10 different beats from over 15, over 12% and 48% and 48% different percent chance. So it's a density forecast. Okay? Yeah, so here is the standard structure of the survey standard so that we can study the positive effect of inflation expectation on the attitude to spending on investment or the actual spending. For actual spending, we need to conduct a survey after 3 months or after 1 month if we want to see the actual spending for the last 1 month, 6 months or 9 months, 1 year, that is the okay? And that is the survey conducted after 3 months, but in some schools, some research, they don't really use a follow-up survey, but they know that they work with some bank and they have the credit card spending of all the participants here, and they can measure the actual spending based on credit card over the last 3 months after the treatment, so that they can measure exactly how much you spend on credit card or debit card, and then we can study the positive effect of inflation expectation here on the actual spending based on how much you spend on credit card or debit card, not only by the follow-up survey after 2 months, but such kind of experiment is very expensive and costly. Because they need to link the survey data here with the bank account, and it's turned out to be very expensive, and it's very hard to increase kind of sample. But the advantage of this kind of research because the quality of the data is higher because the measurement of spending is more reliable compared with the follow survey, with the follow survey because the surveys here just show important about how much you spend over the last month or last 3 months, and with also a lot of measuring errors. We have been to measure of how much you spend over the last month or last 3 months. Yes, that is the structure to measure inflation expectation on the outcome variables, and but before this thing, we also can study the different effect of information treatment we provide on the formation of inflation expectation as well. So this step, we can see the effect of the information we provide on how people form expectation by different pieces of information from the central bank, for example, by the interim target or the current interest rate or the history of actual inflation, for example, to see how people they use the information to provide to form expectation, and which information is strongest to change people belief about future inflation. So it's very much about central bank communication strategy, right? So the central bank can use different pieces of information whether it's better to provide a full monthly policy report or the minutes information about the monetary policy meeting or monetary policy decision. But one is from individuals and one is from the newspaper. And one is directly from the website of the central bank. And then you can see which channel is more likely to change people believe about the future inflation. So the same sector information of those different sources, different channels like TV, radio, or social media, or yeah, yes. That is we can see the most of the source of the information to how people operate their belief. Or yeah, maybe the same set of information from the monetary policy report, but they provide it in different words. So to make it easier for people to understand, for example, or we use a technical term like for economics, or we provide it for the right person, or how we can design the information. It's easier for people to understand. It also has an important impact on how people they update the belief about the future inflation. And the central bank communication now, they for the central bank they also have a unit of the central bank communication with the public, and they have to design the information so that they can increase the effectiveness of the information to counter inflation expectation in the population. Okay. Question.
Do we have questions on people whether they know this information or not?
Yes. Yeah.
Because like that's a different thing, right? For those who already know, it would be like we interpret it in another way for that group of people.
Yes, that's a very good question. Yes. So after the treatment here, we can ask questions like the information here is new to you or not. That's right. So we can ask whether the information is new or not. So after treatment, we can ask them and we see who are more likely to think that the information is new to you. Yeah. So this is possible. We also can ask how informative you think from this information, right? We can ask directly the informative.
Informative.
Informative is the information. Okay. And rank from 1 to 10, for example. So 1 is not informative at all, and 10 is very informative. Right? Yes, so that's this thing we can ask directly after the information and to see how people view the information. And why is it important to ask this question? Because
The level of
yeah.
treatment.
Yeah. So that we can measure the channels or why different information have a different impact on the outcome variable. Because of the informativity of the information or because of the newness of the information, right? Well, that is the full structure of the service experiment. And actually, we just take from this slide and then we can discuss over this slide and just use the slide in the which we'll have the description. Yeah. Any other concerns or questions regarding the structure of this slide? Yeah, also regarding to the new information or not. If we focus on the monetary policy decision, if we want to provide some information about the using monetary policy decision like the central bank just decide to reduce interest rates by 25 basis points, for example. So before we provide the information here, we also can ask questions. Any news from the central bank of the last week, for example, right? Like, have you heard here we ask question about the density forecast after treatment. The aim here is that we want to vary the question before and after the treatment. But if we want to ask the same question twice, it's still okay, but we can ask now, we would like to ask you again question about inflation expectation. Do you want to update or not, right? And if people they say that no, I don't want to update anything, and then just continue. And for those who want to update, and then please tell us what is your expected inflation rate over the next months. That's still okay. And the advantage of such kind of measure is that we can ask the same question twice, so it's very easy to compare before and after the treatment because we use the same format of the question, right? So no difference, so that we can measure likely the difference between before and after the treatment. Here we still can see the difference between the before and after the treatment, but with the point forecast and the density forecast, it also has problem that it, because this question is different, right? So it's hard to measure the difference before and after the treatment because of the as we see yesterday when we look at the summary statistic from the visual effects survey for the data point forecast and density forecast, we also see the difference between the point forecast and density forecast, right? It's not one-to-one, but it's very close to each other and it's strongly correlated between point forecast and density forecast, but it's not one-to-one. But the aim here is to see how the information treatment here apply to the poster belief is okay. And because it's a prior belief here is as a control variable. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah. Okay, good. And also based on this structure, we can also do many other things. It's not only about inflation expectations, but yeah, about other outcome variables like economic growth expectation or answer belief as well. And in my paper, I present on Wednesday at the seminar. We want to see the different narrative on the formation of macroeconomic expectation, right? Like one group we provide about demand narrative, and one group we provide let's say in my examples demand narrative, and one group with a supply. Narratives and the control group without any further information. And also we measure the prior belief before we provide the information here about the prior belief about macroeconomics and post belief also about the macroeconomics question. But we change the question after the treatment here we change that it's considering the effect of climate change policy. Yeah, you see? Something. Yeah, so for poster belief, here we ask about macro expectation again, but considering the impact of green contamination. Policy. So after the treatment, we have a note on this one to make sure that it's a difference between the before and after the treatment. And for this one, we also provide everyone about what does it mean about the green transition policy. So we provide everyone about the green transition hygiene target or the emission, the CO2 emission target from the German government and the measure to achieve green transition target to everyone, to make sure that everyone understand about what we are doing about green transition policy here when we talk about considering the impact of green transition policy. But the difference here between the control group and the treatment group is that the control group receive nothing
No further.
further. But one group they receive the demand narrative and one group receive the supply narrative. So that we can see the impact of different type of narrative on the formation of macroeconomic expectation at the treatment field to see whether people they convince and they change the belief once they receive the demand narrative or supply narrative compared with the control group after the information. Yeah. Right? Yeah, the structure still is the same as before. That's the prior belief, we measure and then we measure post-structure. And in this case, we just focus on the impact of the information treatments on the formation of expectation, and not about the formation of expectation on other outcome variable like spending, saving, or investment, or green investment as well. So the topic we exclude from our survey. Why? Because in our survey it's an add-on project in the Google Spain survey, and the capacity for us is about maximum of 6 questions. So that's why we have to one prior belief, and then we have a poster belief already 3 questions, and after provide the information about the demand narrative and the supply narrative, here we also have one further question. We ask to what extent do you agree with the information we provide and rank from 1 to 10 to see how much they agree with the demand narrative and with the supply narrative, to see the aim here, we want to see how the narrative they change people believe later on. Yeah. That is the structure of the information. Yeah. So I think we can continue with some slide. Bring back to that.
Doctor, I have a question.
Yeah.
So in the belief state, in the first you use for forecast, for the prediction about inflation expectation for month, and after that in the posterior belief state we use density forecast.
Yeah.
Is there any purpose for which type of forecast? I mean, point and density. Can we do the reverse? Like in the first stage we use density, and and after that we use point forecast.
Yes, that's a very good question. Yeah, that's possible as well. And actually in the literature, they also some paper they also use a density forecast first, and they use point forecast later. But the reasons we want to use the on this structure because with the density forecast here we can measure 2 things. One is the level of interest expectation, right? We can measure 2 things. The level of inflation expectation, and we also can measure the uncertainty as well.
Can we do the same for post state?
For the same for both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also possible as etc. But the thing is that it's become very hard to measure both the level and the uncertainty before and after the treatment. Because we need to design the question differently.
Chị cắm ké ở trên đó, trên dưới này tự nhiên mất điện. Chị để em cắm giùm chị này.
So let's talk first about the advantage of the point forecast first and the density forecast and the after the treatment. The advantage of this treatment is two things. One, is that we will see the effect of the information treatment on the level of information condition. And we can study the effect of the information treatment on the uncertainty of the information expectation. Okay? If we measure the point forecast data, we only can see the effect of the information on the level of information expectation without the impact on the uncertainty. So in this structure, we can study the effect of treatment on the level and the uncertainty. Okay, that is the first advantage of this approach. The second advantage of this approach is that when we provide the function here, we talk about, for example, target extension rate at 2%, or the parallel reflection rate at 3%, for example. So this kind of point forecast already. And if we add the point forecast again, it have a problem of the anchoring effect. Because we just say that now I would like to tell you that for example, the treatment number 2 here, the kind of increase rate at 3%. And then you ask what do you think about the expression in the past command.
2%.
So the exactly the number here, right? Or you think about what you think about the next command or next command, they also indicate But if you ask the density forecast here, they have some rings, so they can choose a different number, right? As like we have some anchoring effect from the element which we provide you. Right? So that is the second advantage of this approach, right? We can in this question is at the level that is still is different to the information we provide to mitigate the impact of the anchoring effect. So that is exactly the strategy we one strategy we mitigate the effect of the anchoring effect. Yeah. But of course, we also can use point forecast later and density forecast first. But in this case, we still have the side effect from the anchoring effect, and we have to accept some kind of problem. But we have to acknowledge that there's some potential issue we get into the anchoring effect if you have point forecast after the treatment. But since that's a very good question, we need to think about whether we ask point forecast first and the density forecast, or another way of asking about in-person expectation. And another way to mitigate the anchoring effect. Yeah. So here, yeah. So asking the density forecast here, we can mitigate the anchoring effect. Okay. But we can ask another way. That is, now we can ask a quantitative question about in-person expectation as well. Instead of density forecast, we can ask about quantitative expectation. Yeah. Now we can ask qualitative expectation because it also different scale from the information we provide. That is a number like the kind of increase rate at 3% or target potential at 2%, right? But now we ask about what do you think about the information difference command, whether it increase a lot or decrease a lot or slightly mitigate the anchoring effect. Okay? And we also can ask an open-end question as well. What do you think about inflation in the next month? And this provides us 2 sentences. And then people can free to talk about what they think about the future. Right? So it's another way to mitigate the issues of the anchoring effect. Just because of the number we provide here. Okay?
Why we don't use the in the poster we use the same question for inflation expectation, like density forecast in the first day and density forecast for the posterior belief stage, because I think if use the same questions same measurement,
Yeah.
you can see the direct differences after they approach the information.
Do we the advantage of asking the point forecast?
No, I mean the
Same question.
density forecast for the first day also.
Yeah, as I said, that you also can use density forecast as a primary, and then we can measure the density forecast later.
I don't understand the difference. I mean the purpose of the difference between using the point forecast in first day and using the density forecast in first day.
Yeah. If we do the density forecast in the first test, so as a primary, it means that after the treatment we have to use the point forecast. Or
I mean,
She mentioned that why we did not use the same question for the prior and the post. But as you mentioned before, that interviewer don't like the same question to ask many times.
yeah,
So-
exactly. Yeah, we don't want to use the same question as in book 5. Yeah, because if, for example, now just think about your n is going 3 for the control group without any function, right? And then you just add what do you think about inflation next one, and then in a few seconds later you ask what do you think about inflation next one of the control group, so it is very concerned. Or you have to issue the control group here, and then you ask what do you think about inflation next one, and then you provide some information, and then you ask again the same format of the question, what do you think about inflation expectation? It's a problem of the demanding effect, right? And yes, so when we change the format of the question, it also can have an advantage of reduce the demanding effect, right? So then when we change the format from the point forecast to density forecast, here, now we also can have to mitigate the demand effect, right? Because now just what do you think about inflation month and point forecast, and then you provide the information that now I would like to tell you the target of the central bank for inflation at 2%, and then you ask what do you think about inflation in next month and point forecast. Very much about the demanding effect, right? Because you want the people to change or predict just because the information you provide. But you ask first point forecast and you provide the information, and now we would like to ask you, we know that inflation is have to measure, right, and have to predict. So please tell us about the best guess when you think about inflation, and then we provide the density forecast, for example, like with different beams, so it might mitigate the issues of demanding effect from the experimental, right? By
So
the
is that like attentions?
Hmm?
Apart from attention in information, is it simply When you try to like, it's like it's just different between provide information to the participants and you try to train them to.
Yes, yeah. It also help to to mitigate the attention as well. Yeah, because we ask about the same topic just before and after the treatment. Yeah. And for the MCP forecast here, we learn from the job fact survey with 10 things, but yeah, we also can ask the density forecast here in another similar way. Now we ask about what do you think about future inflation, and this provides a maximum and mean and the probability that, for example, buck is 80% and the root is 3%, and the probability that average inflation rate will be higher than A plus B divided 2. Right? So, and this is a similar for density forecast. What do you think about inflation in the next German? Please provide us the following: the maximum you expect, the minimum you expect, and the probability the average inflation rate will be higher than A plus B divided by 2. So this is an online platform where people fill A, B here, but this one is automatic display in the screen for the respondent. So in this case, maybe they can answer that with a walk here. They can answer it 60%, for example, or 50%, or any number. So this question is similar compared with the new job fact survey, right? With 10 different things, but this question is, I think it's quite straightforward for people to answer. And actually, in my research, I also use this question as well. So recently in my research, and next time, not next time, but in the next few lectures, I also present you, show you how to use this question in the survey and how we can measure expectation in this survey question. And we find that this one is much better than with the density forecast from the job fact, because the quality of the answer is very high. And it also, we can measure both the average and the width and standard deviation as well with OAP. Right? And just and one more option here with the mark and the mean and the probability here. We also can ask about here is option 1. Option 1 can ask about the probability that average inflation will be higher than the midpoint of the mark and the mean. And option 2, that we can ask about what is the most likely inflation rate over the next 12 months. Yeah, and people can answer that A, B, MACD, and then now they can provide a number is C as well. Right? And based on A, B, and C, here we also can calculate the average and the uncertainty as well. Right? And this one is even simpler than option number 1. Yeah, because they don't have the problem with the probability as June, right?
Huy.
Right? We mentioned yesterday that the people is not so good at probability and percent, so this one still has some probability, but this one is even simpler. But we just add about the most likely interest rate, and then people just fill number here. And we find that this question also very powerful as well and easier for people to answer. And yeah, and in my research, I also just use this question in my most recent survey, so I can show you. I can quite confident that this time the version is much better than the density forecast from the Windows XP. Yeah. But just question for you. How we can calculate the uncertainty and the average interest rate just based on 3-point mark mean and the most likely interest rate.
Uncertainty, calculate the variance.
Yeah, the variance.
Mm.
How we can calculate the variance from A, B, and C.
Mean square error
Yeah.
and the variant, the difference between the max and mean and the higher, the most likely. I mean the mean square error in distribution.
Can you write it down here?
Yeah, so C
Yeah.
will.
Can you come and write it down? How to measure average and the variance from the mark mean and the most likely. Yeah.
Because I just amazed that if we have the distribution here,
Yeah.
so the most likely will be between this one and the mean will be here and the max will be here.
Yeah.
So if we for the variance, so we can calculate this, yeah, between
Yeah.
and based on the mean square error or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to write that here, but I just want here for the most likely, yes, and the average, so just, okay, and this already also around here, if the distribution between them is the, like, the same?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the mean, the most likely will be not so far from the average.
Yeah. Yeah. So the idea is correct. But like,
I
let's
don't
think
know.
about how to calculate the average and the variance from this 3-point here. So this one is easy, right? So this one with the option 1 here, I think it's quite easy to calculate the greatest average and the greatest standard deviation. Maybe and option 1 is easy to solve, but option 2 here is a little bit tricky.
Okay, I think it's like, this is not the value, right? It is like the probability.
No, option B here is not, it's most likely.
Probability.
So the average is the mean A, B over 2.
But we also have C here as well.
So you want to include that
Yeah.
C in the formula too?
Yeah.
So, right?
Exactly, because now we also have the information about the most likely interest rate here as well. We ask people 3 questions.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you think about the maximum interest rate, the minimum, and the most likely interest rate? And they provide 3 points here. And based on 3 points here, we also calculate still a weighted and weighted variance or standard deviation from this formula. Right?
We didn't have the probability of that value of inflation, right? We just have A, B, and C.
Yeah, we have A, B, and C, but we have most likelihood, the most likely. A little bit tricky.
Log là likelihood đó.
Yeah.
Is
So
it-
the answer. Actually, ChatGPT can do it better. You can check it. But that is also a question to think. Just think overnight and if you cannot do it, then you can add ChatGPT and present it. That is how we can design different ways to measure safety, but it's important to know here for sure. Also use the density forecast from the new job fact. And use this one. And the most recent research, I use option 2 here. Yeah. And I find that I'm now quite happy with the mark green and option 2 here. I think it's one of the best because we can measure both the uncertainty but also the average of the inflation as well. So we have we can achieve both target about the average and the reference, but the questions will quite easy for people to answer. And when I measure both the point forecast, the point forecast here, there's a point forecast here, and with this format of question, I find that the correlation is very strong and very close to each other. So it means that if the measurement is quite close to each other, it means that the quality of the answer is quite good, and people can interpret easily. Yeah. Okay. That is the structure of the. And now we already solved the problem about the anchoring effect and also how to mitigate the demand effect. But in actual research, so because this is a standard way of the standard structure, but it really depends on different projects. You can have different types of information and different regarding to the probability and possibility. And then you always have to ask yourself what is the potential of the anchoring effect and what is the potential of the demand effect. And we have to think whether our strategy here is able to mitigate the anchoring effect and the demand effect from the experimental or not. Because this question often asked during our presentation that the people we ask do you have any problem with the grounding effect or the anchoring effect or demand effect from experimental or not.
Sorry, I'm still a little bit unclear the difference between the demand effect and the primary effect.
Yeah, so the anchoring and the demand, right? You must see different here, right?
Yes, like anchoring meaning like, because say for example, we provide them with the inflation target.
Yeah.
So it's like we try to anchor them to a certain value, right?
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
then, but the demand effect is like they expect us to think about certain numbers, so they kind of like try to please us and give that numbers to us. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yeah. So demanding effect here is that the response they try to conform the experimental. They just want they try to guess what the experimental one us to answer. What the experimental one need to answer from this question, and they try to answer in a way that is to satisfy the experimental, not about the actual belief or.
Yeah, so in this case, if we provide them with the inflation expectation,
Yeah.
how can we distinguish whether that we are anchoring them or they are thinking that okay, this inflation target is what we want, so they are, trying to conform to our demand. I mean, like, I can't really see it. If the question is not that important, then maybe we can just discuss
Yeah,
it.
so I think I think you get the one key point here. I'm trying to.
Doctor, is it related to their perceive or their acknowledge of whether I mean if they write the number, I mean if they answer the question without their perceive. Em nói tiếng Việt đúng không?
Dạ, em nói đi.
Là nó có liên quan tới cái việc mà người ta trả lời cái câu hỏi ở cái posterior thứ belief là được là họ có nhận thức được cái chuyện đó không á thầy? Tức là nếu như mà tức là theo em hiểu là nếu như mà demand effect á, là họ nhận thức ra là mình phải trả lời để nó hợp với lại cái survey, còn cái anchoring effect thì là họ không có nhận thức được chuyện đó, mà là họ bị vô thức, họ bị cái con số ở cái thông tin đó nó chuyển họ đi.
Đúng rồi.
Dạ.
Đại ý là như vậy.
Đại ý là
Tức là when we provide the information, of course we want the information to have some impact on changing people's belief, right? That is our target with you when we see whether the information we provide can influence people's belief, but we don't want them just to simply take the number we provide here to plug to the answers. That is the anchoring effect, and we also don't want them just try to answer in a way that to conform with our demand. But I think if we try to address these issues in our project or in our papers, I think that it should be reasonable. But before we try to argue about this point, and another way specifically to mitigate the anchoring effect here is that we can separate the surveys here in two steps, in two surveys. For example, when we provide the information here, and then 1 week later, we measure the posture belief. So in this case, maybe people already forgot the number we provide here, but they still maybe have some message from the information we provide, and then we can still measure the posture belief after 1 week. But this is risky because maybe they already forget everything we provide, and then the posture belief here is not much difference between the treatment group and the control group, and then in this case we have the weak information treatments, or the IV of interim variables now become very weak. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is that it's very costly to run a certain survey because the cost of running a survey is not much different regarding to the length of the survey, but this depends on how many surveys you conduct. For example, on projects here, if we conduct 2 surveys, it means that the cost of the survey almost double. If we separate the 1 survey in 2 periods, and the more periods we want to do, the much more cost we have to pay. For example, if we want 1 survey together, here it costs about for 4,000 observation. If we cost about for in Germany, it costs about 10,000 euro. 10,000 euro. Okay. For 1 survey like this one in 15 minutes, and for 4,000 households. Now it's more than 10,000 euro, but roughly 10,000 euro for 1 survey like this one. And if we separate this survey in 2 steps, like in the first way, we just provide the information, and then in the second step, we measure the posture belief and the outcome as the outcome variables. The cost will be roughly 18,000 euro.
So may I ask again about your paper in the last seminar?
Yeah.
You mentioned about 66 waves for for the survey, and only keep 40% of interviewer in the next wave. The first wave, for example, 4,000, and the second is keep 40% of 4,000 and another 60% new.
No, that is for the Michigan survey.
Sorry. So can I ask again about the wave for
So for example, in degree transparency, so the paper I present So it's only everything in one way. But my survey is conducted in the way 66
Yep.
at Bundesbank from 2019 until now. They run about 70 survey already, and my survey is conducted in June 2025.
Yeah.
It's the way 66.
Yeah, 66. Because at first I imagined that you collect the data during 66, not at the 66, but during collect all 66 waves. But no, that is just one time. And
Yeah, one
yeah.
time. Yeah, in June 2025.
Yeah.
Only one time survey.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, so I think this point is what we need to think about when we design our survey strategy. And then I think it's a very depends on case study. So in different project we have different scenario and we have to think how we deal with that. Okay.